Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. And today I thought I would chat with you guys a little bit about something that's come up a lot lately in my comments. And some of them have been positive, some of it negative. And that's basically people saying, Jason, you've really changed your stance over the last year or two regarding rep ranges. I see it as a positive thing. Other people are saying, oh, you flip flopped. And so let's talk about that because it's not about flip flopping, it's about acknowledging that my philosophy and my methodologies were incomplete, okay, that they were incomplete, and that they were based upon some of my own biases, and that at times it caused me to not endorse all the tools that could be useful. So in this case, it's not about changing what we do so much as being able to successfully add more useful tools to our toolkit, right? So rather than being dogmatic, it's about saying, hey, let's find what works and what works best for these different situations and scenarios and see if we can weave these things together correctly. Now, did I have biases against higher rep training? Yes, but a lot of it is personal bias. Number one, obviously, because I value strength more than anything else. I do. But number two, what's going on there? I have an extreme distaste for bodybuilding and bodybuilding culture. And for me, that's largely moral and everything else. I find bodybuilding culture itself to be degenerate and repugnant. Okay? It's a degenerate lifestyle and subculture for the most part. Therefore, I tend to reject it. So, by that same token, when someone comes to me and says, well, what about someone pursuing only hypertrophy? It's like, well, what pops in my head is this horrific, degenerate, disgusting bodybuilding lifestyle. That's what pops in my head when you say that. Okay? And we all have biases, people. Human beings are incapable of not having bias. I have that bias, and you're probably not going to be able to remove that bias. You tell me you're a bodybuilder, what you think a bodybuilder is not what I visualize. I visualize when you tell me that you're a bodybuilder that you're sucking other dudes off for drugs. Okay? That's what I visualize a bodybuilder as. So it's not a positive thing in my mind. So you have that perspective. You have that perspective. But we also have to take into consideration that size equals strength. We have to think in terms of hypertrophy. And we have to look at these different tools and say, okay, these different tools have value. Different rep ranges are suited for certain exercises more than others. And I think most intelligent people realize that. If you think that every rep range works great for every exercise, you haven't done that much training. You have not really had enough experience to probably coach people if you think that's the case. So I can tell you right now that exercises that tend to be great for hitting maxes on safely and effectively don't work very well for 8 to 10 reps. The majority don't. There's a lot of exercises that work phenomenally well at 10 reps, 15 reps, 20 reps. You don't want to do fives with. Okay? They're going to cause injuries. So different exercises are even better suited for certain rep ranges and uses and goals. Some are better for compensatory acceleration and rate of force production than others. So when we start looking at these different things, we have to look at this stuff and say, okay, what is the best way to use these different tools? We can't be dogmatic. Because saying, hey, this seems to be the best way to use it isn't dogmatic because we're saying, let's look at all these different tools. And different rep ranges have value. And you guys see me these days personally doing in the same workout a 1 rep max, 10 rep sets, and 20 rep sets. Yeah, all in the same training session. And I'm using them in the way that I feel is going to work the best towards my size, my strength, my injury prevention, my connective tissue, right? Fatigue management. Trying to use the tools as effectively as possible. Now, there are going to be things I won't be open to, obviously, because people say, why don't you try something like, well, that doesn't sound like a good idea. Meaning, when we try new things, we should try new things that seem intelligent and reasoned from a biomechanics and a fatigue perspective makes sense. We don't just try random stupid crap because someone says, hey, have you tried a weighted handstand push-up? That would be a great 1 rep max. No. Okay, now we're just getting stupid. But the point is we have to be intelligent about the application of these tools, and we have to be willing to look at them without bias and understand that every lift, every training style, every rep range is a tool in the toolbox. We can't be dogmatic about it. We can't. Because if we do, we're not going to be the best that we can be. We're not going to be the best we can be. But by that same token, I will point out that a lot of people out there are just as dogmatic. I'll give you the biggest example we see in this whole industry. People who don't have their lifters do 1 rep maxes, or who don't do 1 rep maxes themselves. Okay? Now, people jump, well, I don't need them. That's dangerous. No, it's not. It's not dangerous, and you do need it if you want to be really strong. You do need it. It is a benefit for even carry over into sports, the real world, everything else. Okay? That is functional training, 1 rep max training. They're being just as dogmatic as when I used to say, well, we don't need to be doing 10s or 12s or 15. We don't need 12 rep sets, right? It's just silly. That's just as dogmatic. What I'm saying is that we should probably be using all these tools, and particularly even the higher rep stuff. No, it's not even always about, can I get hypertrophy through my whole body? I wouldn't train every muscle or lift with a 20 or 25 rep set. Of course not. It's not necessary. It's probably not even beneficial. What about specific lifts and movement patterns that build connective tissue and tendons that get injured easily? Well, that starts to make a lot of sense, doesn't it? Again, when we look at connective tissue and ultra high rep training, and particularly certain things like band work, stretch position movements, things that have a stretch reflex, all right, we're potentially having injury prevention. Or we look at our worst muscles, like for me, delts. Delts are a perfect example. I have a long history of struggling with delt development, and it's very obvious. Well, if we know that different rep ranges do have some slightly different anabolic pathways, if you have a muscle that is particularly lagging, using a fairly wide variety of rep ranges in an intelligent manner, may very well be what you personally need to finally bring that lagging muscle up. Okay. Same thing. Don't always build the best biceps, not because I haven't had big biceps at one point, it's because of an injury. My biceps don't necessarily respond that well anymore. And because I've torn a bicep, I do really, really high rep band curls every day in the evening. Do them every day, every single day. What do I mean high rep? 30 to 60 reps to failure. Why? Builds connective tissue. It might even help bring up my arms. Might help get finally some blood flow to them despite the old scar tissue and injury and stuff there. So, we use these different tools, and we can't be dogmatic about it. And people will say, man, Jason, you're even doing a lot of stuff in the same workout different. Didn't you say at one time that wasn't ideal? Again, that was based upon a flawed set of dogmas and ideologies that some leading experts put out who happen to make their living selling periodized programs. And that whole concept works upon an assumption that progressive overload itself is a driver of hypertrophy rather than progressive overload being evidence of hypertrophy. Well, I think the data suggests it's the latter. And if that's the case, there's a flaw in that methodology, and that's the point we come over to. When we're using an applied science like this, and we're coaching a lot of lifters and ourselves and athletes, we have to learn to set that stuff aside and learn to evolve and learn how to use all of the different tools that we have available when they are appropriate to use them. In other words, instead of being dogmatic, I'm not saying we can't have guidelines. We need guidelines. But they're guidelines, not rules. Okay, there's a difference between a good general guideline and a rule, because when you have a good guideline, you know when to break it. Because maybe it's in the best interest of your lifter to break that guideline and to toss it aside in certain situations Okay, and that's where wisdom, that's where understanding training comes in. But we have to be willing to evolve with that. And we have to be willing to say, okay, instead of dogma and hard rules, let's have guidelines and let's use what works. Let's use what works. Let's figure out what's best for each given situation and do our best to implement that on a case-by-case basis, using our best judgment and our experience and our knowledge. Okay, that's what we should be doing. That's what we should be doing. We're going to have biases. It's human. That's normal. I have them, you have them. But we can't let our biases completely cloud our judgment. That's not intelligent. That's not reasonable. And it's not going to give you the best possible results. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.